The envelope hit the kitchen table with a dull thud. Grace stared at it, then at him, Daniel Adelik, the man whose child she was carrying. His face was stone cold, like they were discussing a business deal instead of a life. Their child's life. "Daniel, please," she whispered, her hand moving to her stomach. "We can figure this out. I know this wasn't planned, but—" "There's nothing to figure out, Grace," he cut her off sharply. "You work for my family. That's all this is. What happened between us was a mistake. One night that should never have happened. But how did a simple housemaid end up pregnant by the billionaire's son she was forbidden to even speak to?" Hello family, welcome back. Please hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It really supports our channel. Don't forget to share with your friends and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And please tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Let me take you back to where it all started. 3 months earlier, Grace was just the housemaid, and Daniel was the billionaire's son she was supposed to stay away from. Grace had been working for the Adelik family for 2 years. Their estate in Lekki, Lagos was massive, 12 bedrooms, an indoor pool, tennis courts, and gardens that stretched forever. Her job was simple: keep everything spotless, stay invisible, and never get in the way. Mrs. Victoria Adelik, Daniel's mother, was particular about everything. The way the towels were folded, the temperature of her morning tea, the angle of the throw pillows in the living room. Grace learned quickly to follow her rules without question. She needed this job desperately. Her mother back in Abort was sick, and the medical bills were piling up. Grace had dropped out of nursing school to work and support her family. Daniel was different from what she expected. She'd seen him in photos around the house, always in a suit, always serious, always surrounded by important people. The heir to Adelik Enterprises, a real estate empire worth billions. But when Grace finally met him in person, he surprised her completely. It was a Tuesday morning. Grace was in the library dusting the shelves like she did every week. The ladder wobbled slightly under her feet as she reached for the top shelf. She should have been more careful. The ladder tipped. Grace gasped, arms flailing, waiting to hit the hardwood floor. Instead, strong hands caught her, steadying her fall. "Careful there," a deep voice said. Grace looked down into warm brown eyes. Daniel Adelik was holding her, his hands firm on her waist. Up close he was even more striking. Dark hair slightly messy, a day's worth of stubble on his jaw, and a small scar above his right eyebrow. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Adelik," Grace stammered, her cheeks burning. "I should have been more careful." "Daniel," he corrected gently. "Just call me Daniel." He helped her down from the ladder, his hands lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Grace felt her pulse quicken. "You're Grace, right?" he asked. "You've been working here for a while now." Grace was shocked he knew her name. "Yes, sir. I mean Daniel." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "I've seen you around. You're always working. Don't you ever take a break?" "Breaks don't pay the bills," Grace replied, trying to sound casual. His smile faded slightly. "Right. Of course." He paused, studying her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "Well, my mother's at her charity event. You could take an hour if you wanted." "I won't tell." Grace shook her head quickly. "I'm fine, but thank you." She should have walked away then. Should have remembered her place. But something in the way he looked at her made it impossible to move. Would this chance encounter spark a forbidden romance that would change both their lives forever? Over the next few weeks, Daniel found reasons to be wherever Grace was working. He'd bring her coffee while she cleaned the conservatory. They'd talk about everything: books, music, dreams they'd tucked away. Daniel told her about the pressure of being an Adelik, how he felt trapped by expectations. How everyone saw only the family name and the money, never the real person underneath. Grace told him about her sick mother in Ibadan, how she dropped out of nursing school to take care of the medical bills. How she dreamed of going back one day. "You're different," Daniel said one evening. They were in the conservatory, rain drumming against the glass. "Most people just see the Adelik name. You actually see me." "Daniel, we shouldn't." "This isn't—" Grace struggled to find the words. Her heart was pounding. "I know," he interrupted, moving closer. "I know all the reasons this is impossible. But I can't stop thinking about you, Grace. I can't stop wanting to be near you." Grace's breath caught. "You're engaged to someone." "To Patricia." "To someone my parents chose," Daniel said, his voice tight. "Someone who fits their world. But when I'm with you, I feel like I can finally breathe." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Grace knew it was wrong. Knew she should walk away. Knew this could only end badly. But when he kissed her, soft and tentative, she kissed him back. That kiss changed everything. It was gentle at first, questioning like they were both testing whether this was real. Then his hands were in her hair, and hers were gripping his shirt. Nothing else mattered except the feeling of finally giving in to what they'd both been fighting. "Grace," he whispered against her lips. "God, Grace." They made love that night in the guest cottage by the pool, a place where no one would find them. Afterwards, lying in his arms, Grace let herself believe in the impossible. She let herself believe that love could conquer everything. "I'm going to end things with Patricia," Daniel murmured into her hair. "I'll talk to my parents. We'll figure this out together. I promise." "Are you sure?" Grace asked, tracing patterns on his chest. "Your family?" "My family doesn't control my heart," he said firmly. "You do." Grace wanted desperately to believe him. For 2 months they existed in secret. Stolen moments between her shifts. Late-night phone calls when his family thought he was working. Weekend drives to small towns where nobody knew the Adelique name. He told her he loved her 17 times. Grace counted each one like a treasure. "I love you, Grace," he said one Sunday morning. They were at a small restaurant in Abeokuta, 2 hours from Lagos, eating and pretending they were just a normal couple. "I love you too," Grace replied, squeezing his hand across the table. Her heart felt full to bursting. "I'm serious about this," Daniel continued. "About us? I'm going to talk to my father this week. Tell him I'm calling off the engagement." "What if he says no?" Grace's voice was small, afraid. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then I'll walk away from everything. The company, the money, all of it. As long as I have you." Looking back, Grace should have known it was too good to be true. The night everything changed started like any other. Daniel had been away on business for a week in Abuja. Grace missed him terribly, counting down the hours until he returned. They'd been texting all day, making plans, dreaming about their future. "Can't wait to see you tonight," his last message read. "I have something important to tell you." Grace's heart soared. Maybe he'd finally told his parents. Maybe they could stop hiding. Maybe their life together could finally begin. But when Daniel came home that evening, everything Grace believed in was about to shatter into a million pieces. Daniel walked right past Grace in the hallway without even looking at her. His face was pale, his jaw clenched tight. Grace felt ice spread through her chest. Something was terribly wrong. She waited until late that night after everyone had gone to bed, then crept upstairs to his room. She knocked softly on his door. "Come in," he called. Grace slipped inside, closing the door behind her. "Daniel, what's going on? You've been avoiding me all evening." He was standing by the window, his back to her, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "We need to talk." Those 4 words sent terror through Grace's veins. "Okay," she whispered. Daniel turned to face her. His expression was blank, emotionless, like looking at a stranger. "Grace, this thing between us, it can't continue." What happened in Abuja?" Grace's voice cracked. "My father found out about us," Daniel said flatly. "One of the staff saw us together last month and told him. He's furious." Grace felt the room start to spin. "So what does that mean?" "It means it's over." Daniel wouldn't meet her eyes. "It means we made a mistake." "A mistake?" Grace repeated, her voice breaking. "Daniel, you said you loved me. You promised we'd figure this out together." "I was naive," he said coldly. "This was never going to work, Grace. You have to see that. We're from different worlds." Tears burned Grace's eyes. "Different worlds? You didn't care about that 2 weeks ago when you were telling me I was the best thing that ever happened to you." "I'm engaged, Grace. The wedding is in 4 months." His voice was hard. "My family has business deals tied to this marriage. If I back out now, it could cost us millions. Hundreds of people could lose their jobs." "So this was about money all along?" Grace felt sick. "This is about responsibility," Daniel snapped. "Something you clearly don't understand." His words hit Grace like physical blows. "I don't understand? I've been working since I was 16 to support my family. Don't you dare talk to me about responsibility. Just leave, Grace." Daniel's voice was tired. "Please. This is hard enough." "Hard for you?" Grace laughed bitterly through her tears. "You're breaking my heart and it's hard for you?" "I never meant to hurt you," Daniel said quietly, finally looking at her. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "But you did," Grace cried, not caring who heard. "You made me believe in us. You made me fall in love with you. You promised me forever." "I'm sorry," he said. "But this is how it has to be. You need to understand, my family comes first. It always has." What we had was nice. But it wasn't real. Not real. Grace could barely breathe. How can you say that after everything? Daniel's next words destroyed her completely. You're the maid, Grace. What did you think was going to happen? That I'd actually choose you over my entire life? Grace felt something break inside her. You're a coward, Daniel Adelic. A coward and a liar. Maybe, he agreed. But at least I'm being honest now. Take it as a kindness. Grace turned and walked out, each step feeling like she was leaving pieces of her heart behind on his expensive carpet. 2 weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. Grace stared at the positive pregnancy test in the staff bathroom, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not like this. But it was. 2 more tests confirmed it. Grace was carrying Daniel Adelik's baby. How would the man who called their love a mistake react when he learned he was going to be a father? Grace found Daniel in his study that evening, working on his laptop. When she knocked, he looked annoyed at the interruption. What is it, Grace? His tone was dismissive, like she was bothering him. Grace closed the door behind her. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. I need to talk to you. It's important. Daniel sighed, closing his laptop. Make it quick. I have a conference call in 10 minutes. Grace took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's face went through several expressions: shock, disbelief, and finally something cold and calculating. Are you sure? He asked. Grace pulled the pregnancy test from her pocket and placed them on his desk. 3 positive tests lined up in a row. Daniel stared at them for a long moment. How far along? About 6 weeks. From that night in the guest cottage. He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This is a disaster. A disaster? Grace's voice shook. Daniel, this is our baby. No, he said sharply, turning to face her. This is a problem. One that needs to be handled quickly and quietly. Handled? Grace felt cold all over. What does that mean? Daniel walked to his desk and pulled out his checkbook. He wrote something quickly, tore out the check and held it out to her. 50,000 naira. Get the procedure done somewhere discreet. I'll have my assistant set it up if you need help finding a clinic. Grace stared at the check, unable to believe what she was hearing. You want me to abort our baby? It's not a baby yet, Grace. It's a few weeks old. A cluster of cells. His voice was matter-of-fact, businesslike. This is the best solution for everyone. The best solution? Grace felt fury rising through the pain. For everyone or for you? For both of us, Daniel insisted. Think about it. You're 24 years old, working as a maid, barely making ends meet. How are you going to raise a child? You can't even afford your mother's medical bills. So you're doing me a favor? Grace asked sarcastically. How generous. I'm being practical. Daniel pushed the check toward her again. Take the money, Grace. Get the abortion. Move on with your life. Find someone from your own world. Have kids when you're actually ready. Grace looked down at the check. 50,000 naira. More money than she'd ever seen at once. Enough to pay off some of her mother's medical debt. All she had to do was give up her baby. No, Grace said quietly. What? No. Grace pushed the check back across the desk. I'm not doing it. I'm keeping this baby. Daniel's expression hardened. Don't be stupid, Grace. You can't possibly think this is a good idea. I think it's my choice, Grace said, her voice stronger now. This is my body, my baby, and I'm keeping it. Then you're on your own. Daniel's voice was ice. I'll deny everything. It'll be your word against mine. A disgruntled employee trying to trap a wealthy man. No one will believe you. I don't care if they believe me, Grace said, tears streaming down her face. I know the truth and so do you. If you go through with this, you're fired, Daniel continued. Effective immediately. And I'll make sure you never work in Lagos again. I have connections everywhere. Fine. Grace wiped her tears away roughly. I'll work somewhere else. Anywhere else as long as it's far away from you. You're making a huge mistake, Daniel said. The only mistake I made was loving you. Grace turned toward the door, then stopped and looked back at him one last time. You know what's really sad, Daniel? I actually thought you were different. I thought underneath all that money and privilege you were a good person. But you're not. You're exactly what everyone thinks you are. A spoiled, selfish rich boy who's never had to face real consequences for anything. Get out, Daniel said through clenched teeth. Gladly. Grace walked out of his study, out of the Adelik mansion and out of that life forever. Would Grace survive as a single mother with no job, no money, and a heart shattered into pieces? Mrs. Victoria Adelique found Grace packing her room an hour later. "Grace," she said from the doorway, "Daniel told me about your situation." Grace continued folding her clothes, not looking at her. "Then you know I'm leaving." "Yes." Mrs. Adelique stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "I'm not going to pretend to understand your choices, but I will give you this." She placed an envelope on Grace's bed. 2 months severance and a reference letter. "It says you left for personal reasons." "Thank you," Grace said stiffly. "Grace, look at me." Mrs. Adelique's voice was softer than Grace had ever heard it. When Grace finally met her eyes, she saw something like sympathy there. "I know my son can be difficult. But this baby, if you truly intend to keep it, deserves better than to be raised in anger and resentment." "I'll manage," Grace said. "I'm sure you will." Mrs. Adelique paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I think you're very brave. Foolish perhaps, but brave." After she left, Grace sat on the bed and let herself cry one last time for Daniel, for them, for everything that could have been. Then she dried her tears, finished packing, and called a taxi. She was 24 years old, pregnant, unemployed, and about to become a single mother. But Grace wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. And anger, she was learning, could be just as powerful as love. Grace went to stay with her mother in Abort, 300 kilometers away from Lagos and the Adeliques. She couldn't tell her mother the whole truth. It would devastate her to know Grace had gotten involved with her employer. So Grace told her she'd been dating someone who turned out to be engaged. "Oh, my dear," her mother said, pulling her into a hug despite her frail condition. "These things happen. You'll get through this. We'll get through this together." Finding work while pregnant was harder than Grace expected. Most places took one look at her growing belly, and suddenly the position was filled. Grace finally got a job waitressing at a small restaurant near their apartment. The tips weren't great, but it was enough to cover rent and groceries. Her pregnancy progressed normally. Morning sickness hit hard for the first trimester. Grace was exhausted all the time, working double shifts to save money for when the baby came. Every night, she'd come home and collapse on the couch, too tired to move. But Grace never regretted her decision. Not once. At her 20-week ultrasound, the technician smiled at her. "Do you want to know the gender?" "Yes," Grace breathed. "It's a girl." Grace was having a daughter. Tears streamed down her face as she watched her tiny form on the screen. Her perfect little hands, her beating heart, her beautiful profile. "She's healthy," the technician continued. "Everything looks perfect." Grace named her Joy. Joy Rose Walker. No Adelique anywhere in her name. Daniel had given up that right when he tried to pay her to abort their child. Joy was born on a rainy February morning after 14 hours of labor. The moment they placed her in Grace's arms, wrinkled and screaming and absolutely perfect, Grace fell completely in love. "Hi, baby girl," Grace whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama and I'm going to love you forever." Joy had Grace's dark hair and pale skin, but her eyes, those warm brown eyes that Grace saw every time she looked at her, those were pure Daniel. Being a single mother was harder than anything Grace had ever done. The sleepless nights, the constant worry about money, the loneliness of doing it all alone. But every time Joy smiled at her, every time she wrapped her tiny fingers around Grace's, Grace knew it was worth it. Grace didn't tell Daniel that Joy was born. He'd made his choice and Grace had made hers. Joy was 8 months old when Grace's phone rang with an unfamiliar Lagos number. "Hello, Grace. It's Victoria Adelique." Grace's blood ran cold. "How did you get this number?" "I have my ways," Mrs. Adelique said. "I'm calling because I need to know something. Did you have the baby?" Every maternal instinct screamed at Grace to lie, to protect her daughter from these people who'd already rejected her once. But Grace was tired of hiding, tired of being ashamed of the best thing that ever happened to her. Would Grace allow the Adeliques back into their lives, or had Daniel lost his daughter forever? "Yes," Grace said firmly. "I have a daughter. Her name is Joy. She's 8 months old, healthy and perfect. And we're doing just fine without your son's money." Silence stretched across the line. Then quietly, "Daniel doesn't know, does he?" "He made it very clear he didn't want to know," Grace replied. "Grace, I know my son hurt you terribly. But this child, she's still Daniel's daughter. She deserves to know her father." "She deserves a father who wants her," Grace corrected. "Not someone who tried to pay me to abort her." "You're right," Mrs. Adelique said, surprising Grace. "You're absolutely right. But people make mistakes. Terrible, unforgivable mistakes. The question is whether you'll allow Daniel the chance to correct his." He had his chance, Grace said coldly. He chose fear, Mrs. Adelic replied. Fear of disappointing his family. Fear of losing everything. It was cowardly, yes, but it was fear, not malice. And now things are different. What do you mean? The wedding was called off 3 months ago. Patricia found out about you and the affair. She ended things and Daniel has been lost ever since. Good, Grace thought viciously. Let him suffer. Why are you telling me this? Grace asked. Because despite everything you deserve to know. And because if Daniel knew about Joy, I think he'd want to meet her. Mrs. Adelic paused. I'm not asking you to take him back. I'm not even asking you to forgive him. But would you consider letting him meet his daughter? Grace looked over at Joy, sitting in her bouncer, chewing on her favorite toy. She was laughing, completely oblivious to the complicated world of adults. If he wants to meet her, Grace said slowly, he can come to Abort alone. No lawyers, no checks, no conditions. He comes as a man, not as an Adelic. I'll tell him, Mrs. Adelic promised. Thank you, Grace. 3 days later, Daniel showed up at Grace's apartment door. He looked terrible, thinner than she remembered, with dark circles under his eyes. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair uncombed. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Grace, he said, her name rough on his tongue. Thank you for seeing me. Grace didn't move from the doorway. Why are you here, Daniel? To apologize. To beg for forgiveness. To meet my daughter if you'll let me. He swallowed hard. I know I don't deserve any of those things, but I'm asking anyway. Why now? Because your wedding fell through? Because your perfect life imploded? Daniel flinched. Because I've been a coward. Because I let fear control my decisions. Because every single day since you left, I've regretted what I did to you. Words are cheap, Daniel. I know. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the check Grace had refused months ago. He tore it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. I don't want to buy my way out of this. I want to be a father. If you'll let me, if she'll let me. I know I have no right to ask. Joy chose that moment to start crying from inside the apartment. Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes widening at the sound of his daughter's voice for the first time. That's her, he whispered. Against every ounce of common sense she had, Grace stepped aside. 5 minutes. That's all you get. Daniel entered Grace's tiny apartment like he was walking into something sacred. Joy was in her playpen, crying over a dropped toy. The moment Daniel saw her, he froze. Oh my God, he breathed. She has your eyes, Grace said, moving to pick Joy up. And your stubborn personality. Joy, there's someone here to meet you. Grace held her protectively as Daniel approached slowly, carefully, like Joy might disappear if he moved too fast. His face was a mixture of wonder and pain. Hi, Joy, he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm Daniel. I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. I'm so sorry. Joy studied him with those serious brown eyes, his eyes, as if weighing whether this stranger was worth her time. Then, inexplicably, she reached for him. Grace's heart clenched as Daniel looked at her, silently asking permission. Grace nodded. Daniel gently took Joy in his arms. He held her like she was made of glass, tears streaming openly down his face. Joy seemed to sense something, some biological connection, and settled against his chest, grabbing his finger with her tiny hand. She's perfect, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. She's absolutely perfect, Grace. Thank you. Thank you for keeping her, for raising her, for being strong when I was weak. She's not a gift I'm giving you, Daniel. She's a person. And if you want to be in her life, you need to prove you deserve to be. Daniel nodded, not taking his eyes off Joy. Anything. Tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. And surprisingly, he did. Daniel got an apartment in Abort. He came over every day, learning how to change diapers, prepare bottles, and soothe Joy when she cried. He was patient when she refused his comfort and wanted only Grace. He showed up again and again, proving through actions what his words alone couldn't. Slowly, impossibly, Grace began to believe him again. Not all at once. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. But piece by piece, day by day, Daniel earned his way back into their lives. It took a full year of Daniel showing up, being present, and choosing them over everything else. A year of watching him love Joy with complete devotion. Eventually, inevitably, Grace fell back in love with him. They took it slow, dated properly this time, and built something real on honest foundations. Daniel proposed simply one evening while Joy played between them on the floor. Marry me, he said. Not because it's expected, but because I can't imagine my life without you both. Grace said yes. They married in a small ceremony in Abaddon. Just them, Joy, Grace's mother, and surprisingly Mrs. Adelique, who had made peace with their relationship. 5 years after that terrible morning in the Adelique kitchen, Grace stood in their backyard in Abaddon, watching Joy play with her baby brother. Daniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. Grace leaned back against him, watching their children laugh in the sunshine. Joy was teaching her brother how to blow bubbles, her brown eyes bright with joy. "Yeah," Grace said, meaning it completely. "I really am." The journey had been brutal. The heartbreak had nearly destroyed her. But looking at Joy, at their son, at the life they'd created from ashes, Grace wouldn't change a single moment. Not even the painful ones. Because those painful moments had forged them into something stronger, something real, something worth fighting for. And standing there surrounded by the family they'd fought so hard to build, Grace knew they'd finally found their way home. We've come to the end of today's story. I hope it touched your heart. Thanks for watching and staying with us till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?